Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and I have with me fantasy author Aaron N. Hall. Um, Aaron's books include The Legend of The
Yeah, well
Wesleyan
done.
Chronicles, which the first book is Foreordained, as well as My Name is Hammerfist, and a couple collections of short stories, poems, and whatnot. Um, the next one of that type of book, Where Should I Put This Woodpecker, comes out next month, which
Hmm.
I'm excited for. You sent an email out to, I don't know if it was to everybody on your newsletter or whatever, to download ARC. So
Hmm.
if you want to participate in that, there's still plenty of time to get that and read it, um,
Yep.
and put a review out for Aaron. Aaron, thank you so much for getting on with me today. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like you did such a good introduction. Yeah, I mean, I've been writing stories since I was 9 years old. That's when I first discovered that I loved storytelling and started writing my first novel, Foreordained, when I was 15. Got it published when I was 23, just a sophomore in college. And since then, I've written a handful of other books, and Where Should I Put This Woodpecker comes out next month. But my most successful book in recent memory is The Legend of my fantasy comedy that feels like Dungeons and Dragons and Adventure Time. It's getting tremendous reviews. It's making its rounds around the indie fantasy space. People are falling in love with it, so I'm really grateful.
You're also very prolific on social media. So, like, if you are not following Aaron, he does a great job reviewing books, coming up with unique content, um, and really helping build the fantasy fan base. So, you do an amazing job at that. So, if you want somebody to follow that does a great job recommending books and kind of giving a their pulse on what is happening in fantasy, like Aaron's your guy. He does a great job at it. Um,
Oh, thank you.
Aaron, so you started Foreordained when you were 15. So
Hmm.
what kept you going on that book? You said you published, 23, that's 8 years. What
Yeah,
kept you going on that book instead of like, okay, I'm going to shelve this and work on something else? Like, what made you stick to that?
no, totally. Well, I mean, during the school year, Foreordained wasn't something that I was like slaving away at. It was usually something that I worked on during the summer when I didn't have to worry about class or homework. But what really started motivating me a lot was my friend Taylor Dickey during senior year of high school. He sat behind me in English class, and we had this like period of like 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning of every class where we were just supposed to read something. And Taylor found out that I was writing a book and he was like, I want to read it. So I would print off chapters at a time and staple them together and give them to Taylor. And he would read them every day in class. And he would always bug me, like, when's the next chapter coming out? And it reached the point where I was like, okay, well, I don't have anything more written. So I need to friggin' finish this for Taylor. So I did. I finished that book halfway through my senior year, the first draft. And, you know, my plan was to get it published so it could sell while I was on my LDS mission and it would help pay for my LDS mission. But it's funny. I took that manuscript when it was done. I found a publisher who I thought would be a good fit, wrote a query letter, and on the way to the post office, I just didn't have a good feeling about it. It was just like this sinking feeling in my gut. And I decided not to send it off that day. But after I went on my mission, came home, I took a look at the manuscript and I was like, oof, this thing needs work. Like this has some issues. So I spent like a solid year revising the book, rewriting a bunch of stuff, and finally published it during my second year of college. So, I mean, there was a gap in there for my mission and, some time I spent revising. And yeah, so that's why it took like 7 years for that book to come out.
So you said you were going to send it to a publisher. What made you decide to go the indie route?
Well, it was around the time that I was in college. I think I was doing like a book buyback thing, where at the end of the semester you could bring your textbooks to the bookstore and they would like, buy them off you for pennies on the dollar. And for some reason, the book thing came up of like I was looking to publish a book, and the lady at the front counter said, "Oh, have you thought about self-publishing?" And I said, "What's that?" Because it was so new. It was like 2011 or like 2013 at the time. And she said, "Oh yeah, like you can just self-publish through Amazon. You don't have to go through a publisher and you maintain the rights and you get bigger royalties. It's like kind of a growing thing, but people are really liking it." And I'm like, that sounds so interesting. So yeah, I started looking into it and just the thought of doing it all myself was so appealing to me. Like I wasn't beholden of someone else's schedule or whims, and I could just run the show myself. That was both a positive and negative because I was a 23-year-old with no editor, no marketing plan. So I'm amazed that I got positive reviews for that first, edition of the book. But yeah, I just heard about self-publishing, sounded like a good idea, so I've stuck with it ever since.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So what was the spark for the idea when you first started at 15?
Oh, it was a seminary video, believe it or not. So I grew up a very devout member of the LDS Church. I have kind of a complicated relationship with it now, but I used to be very devout. And when I was in this thing called seminary, it's where LDS teenagers can like take an hour outside of school to like learn from the scriptures from, specified scriptorians in the area. It's like Bible study, like, allowed Bible study outside the course of public school. Anyway, so we had this class one day and they decided to put on a movie, and it was about this prince who had been kidnapped by bandits or whatever, and these bandits tried to like subject him to, sinful living, with like just like gluttony and like women, duh, duh, and the prince just wasn't having it at all. So the bandits are finally like, dude, what the heck? Like, we've given you all these pleasures. Why will you not partake? And the prince said, because one day I'm meant to be king. And to me, I was like, what if there was some system of government where like you could not rule as a monarch unless you were a good person? Like you had to prove that you were a good human being in order to rule. And that was kind of the inception for the idea of foreordained, because in the book, um, each king is appointed by foreordination. It's not like bloodline or succession. It's you had such a righteous spirit in this like world before mortality that you are foreordained to rule when your time comes by the sacred dragon who appoints you. So yeah, in the book, the current King Barnabas is kind of this evil guy who usurped the throne through cunning and conspiracy. But Jason is a poor boy from a poor part of the kingdom's capital who finds out that he's been foreordained to be the next king, and he doesn't want to be king. But he kind of feels the weight on his shoulders of rising up to the throne for the sake of the good of everybody. So yeah, the first book follows his reluctant ascension to the throne as he's tested and as he kind of rose to understand why he is the person to become king.
That's awesome. It sounds fantastic. I just picked up the book on for ebook, and I'm
Oh,
excited to
cool.
read it.
Hmm.
And it sounds like, if you have, I don't know, like a teenager or somebody that, is looking for a good fantasy read that you might not want to give them like I don't know, introduce them to adult themes and whatnot.
Totally.
It would be a fantastic book for them. Like I have a 17-year-old that I'm excited for him to read it too.
No, totally. I mean, I write it to be approachable and accessible for like ages 11, 12 and up. Like it is kind of a mix between Chronicles of Narnia and Game of Thrones, where it has like a lot of that Christian symbolism and themes of like having faith and trusting in a higher power and seeing your divine worth, but it is accessible for people who aren't religious at all. Like as a matter of fact, when the book first came out, the best reviews I got were from like staunch atheists, which I thought was like kind of funny. Um, but yeah, so it's got kind of that Christian symbolism, but it's got the political intrigue, it's got the sword battles, it's got the magic. So it is like a good gateway to epic fantasy if you don't want to deal with like a lot of heavy content and stuff.
No, that's fantastic. And that is important. Like if you want a gateway to fantasy, from my experience, I was introduced as a young man, like a young boy. And, if my mom would have given me, say, Game of Thrones or something like that, like I would have been put off of it. But like I was
Oh yeah.
introduced, yeah, to probably like lots of people my age, like Lord of the Rings, Narnia,
Mm,
Shannara series, like those classics. And
nice.
so, and ever since then, like I've just been a huge fan of it. So
Hmm.
if you have a child that you want to introduce them to a fantasy lifestyle, I should say, because sometimes it could take over your life.
Hmm.
It sounds like a great book for that gateway.
No, totally. Yeah, I totally recommend it for like ages 11, 12 and up. Yeah, and parents don't have to worry too much about content. It's pretty clean.
Awesome. Now, what was the spark for Legend of
Oh, dude, it was based on a D&D campaign that I had with some of my close friends. We were sitting around the living room one day, just kind of brainstorming funny fantasy characters that would be fun to like kind of put in the D&D world. And my character was a human cleric named Friar Steve, who has a lazy eye, no chin, and he yells everything he says due to a speech impediment. But he's like really loyal. He's got a huge heart. He's really annoying, but like he's a cleric, so his spells come in clutch in a fight. But so we all kind of like came up with these ideas of like fun characters, and my buddy Zach peer pressured us all into playing Dungeons and Dragons. All of us were kind of reluctant at the time because it's like, yeah, we like fantasy and video games, whatever. But like Dungeons and Dragons is like next level nerd. This was like before Stranger Things had come out and it was starting to like normalize and mainstream Dungeons and Dragons. Um, but Zach talked us into it, and that first night, I think we sat and gamed for like 6 hours. We just had so much fun. So that started a campaign that went for like years. Like every other week, once a month or something, we'd get together like for 3 or 4 years to do this campaign. But I kept telling the guys, one day I'm going to write a book based on this D&D adventure, because I write novels and whatever, and I think this is so much fun. And they said, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever." But it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that I locked in, and I was like, "Nope, now is the time." And I had to take a lot of creative liberties to make it fit into a novel. Like all of our characters are in there, but they're not main characters. Mine is. I felt like Friar Steve fit within the main party well enough that he could have like like a solid stay. But Dwayne the Pebble Johnson and Sir Percival Buttons, these other characters my friends had, pop up intermittently throughout the book. So that was the inspiration. Is I just wanted to make a fun book based on the D&D campaign that I had with my best friends.
That's awesome. And I think lots of novelists, like especially if you're a teenager, like just beginning your journey, like that's where a lot of ideas come from. I know like when I was in high school, my first foray into writing a novel was from a D&D campaign that I had way back in the,
Mm.
in the early 90s.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
and it's fun and those times live with you forever, right? Like those stories become a part of you. Um,
Mhm.
how do you how do you balance and what's your biggest challenge in balancing epic scope with character-driven storytelling?
Ooh, I like that question. I feel like it is kind of a constant balancing act. I think the way that I like to handle it is when I'm starting out writing a book and I'm figuring out the setting and the conflict and the characters, I first want to figure out what the characters need from this story. Like how do they need to grow or change between the beginning and end of the book? What is a weakness that they have to confront? What is an imperfection that they have to chip away at, And I feel like that lends credibility and realism to the characters, because I think we normalize people through their imperfections, through the parts where they sometimes fall short. And when you force those imperfect people into um, extraordinary circumstances, that can accelerate their personal growth. So I think that's kind of how I try to balance those things. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I love that. I love when people focus on weaknesses and how to overcome. I find that so much more interesting. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I show you. And I didn't. I didn't know we were going to talk about role playing games. I mean, I was going to probably bring it up, but if you can see this, it's the
Oh,
first
sick.
edition Pathfinder.
Nice.
So, and I like playing, fifth edition D&D and whatnot, but I like AD&D 2E, and I like, Dungeons and Dragons 3.0 and 3.5 and Pathfinder, the first edition, because it lends more to having your characters have weaknesses and
Mhm.
the creative ways that you can overcome challenges by those weaknesses is always so much more interesting than just like in 5e and Pathfinder 2e. It seems like you're building almost godlike characters and
Mhm.
things aren't quite as interesting to me. Like, oh yeah, you can always throw more enemies at them, but when there's um, your only challenge is because there's so many members of your opposing force, like that's not as interesting as like figuring things out because you have a lazy eye and you have a speech impediment and stuff like that. Like how do you
Mhm.
overcome those challenges? So like I agree with you totally.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Um, So I feel like we've already talked about this, but are there any hidden influences in your work that readers might be surprised to learn about? I mean, we are kind of already talked about one, about the seminary video, but is there any others?
Oh gosh. I mean, I feel like I'm influenced by every story I consume, you know? It kind of becomes this hodgepodge, this soup of like, taking the ingredients that I feel like worked really well and figuring out, ooh, I got to apply that to my own stuff. And then I just kind of throw it in my brain and stir it around a little bit. But I feel like some of my major influences, actually, video games have been a big influence for me. I'm not much of a gamer anymore, but like growing up as a teen, my brothers were huge gamers, and I was like a pretty moderate gamer. But at 9 years old, I played The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64. And that was my spark to start writing fantasy, because I was learning at that age that I liked telling stories. But when I played Zelda, like that was an experience. It wasn't just a video game I was playing. It was like an adventure that I was on. And to me, I was like, I need to make stuff like this. This is amazing. And not long after, I started playing this game called Skies of Arcadia for the Sega Dreamcast. It's this little known JRPG about air pirates, and the main ensemble of characters really kind of taught me a lot about ensemble casting. It's like, no, you make these characters that feel different and distinct, but kind of come together in a fun, unique way to make this fun soup of ensemble casting. So I've kind of always looked to Skies of Arcadia for that sense of adventure and for that really terrific ensemble casting. And like Lord of the Rings has been big. I saw the movies when I was a kid and loved them. I didn't learn to love the books until my mid to late 20s. The books are very slow paced and they're very big and detailed. So I had to kind of like gain a taste for classic literature before I was ready to read Lord of the Rings. But man, now Return of the King is my favorite book. Like it is, I felt everything in that book, and when I finished it, when I reached the end, I didn't want it to be over. Like no other book has had that effect on me ever. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's all over the place, man. I feel like I've been influenced by so many things. It's hard to pin down. Well, I guess I did pin down like three or four things for you, but
No, that's awesome. Um, so when you're writing, are you an outliner or a pantser? Like, what's your writing process?
I'm a big outliner, but then I give myself the grace to pants when necessary. I find that if I make an outline that figures out, who are the characters, what do they need to learn or develop by the end of the story, like what are the challenges that they're struggling with both internally and externally, and then what is the external conflict that they all have to deal with, what is the danger that they have to alleviate, um, and then what happens chapter by chapter. I'll make like just a bulleted list pages long of like a bullet per chapter. If this is what happens, then this happens, and then this happens, and that causes this to happen, blah, 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 until the end of the book. So that becomes kind of like my roadmap for where I want the story to go. However, I've had many experiences where I'm writing along, following my outline, and then I reach a point where I'm like, wait, what if this happened instead? Ooh, that would be nice. I mean, that would really just take the tension up and like it would give me some really fun ingredients to work with later in the book. So I give myself the grace to follow that instead. So sometimes things in the outline don't even end up happening, or they get things added in that I wasn't planning on initially. Like in The Legend of they reach a city called Varys, where one thing happens to the main character, Sir Dashing Jr., DJ, that's pretty heavy. Pretty emotionally heavy. It's speaks a lot to his character development, but then I just had this idea of one of the characters from the party gets kidnapped and they have to rescue them. But in order to rescue them, they have to make this potion called a clairvoyance potion where they can like track where this person has been carried off to. So they go to this apothecary, not apothecary, an apothecary who's run by a guy named Dr. Snipe, who is a clear riff on Professor Snape from Harry Potter. And that was not in my outline at all. I was just moving along in the story and then thought to myself, ooh, wouldn't it be fun? This would be a great opportunity to kind of like poke fun at Harry Potter and Professor Snape, by making this character called Dr. Snipe, who's in love with the main character's mom and has never gotten over it for decades. And he's got long, greasy black hair and kind of drawls when he speaks and he moves like a slow, depressed thing. So yeah, that was definitely like more of a pantser moment than an outline moment, but it was great. It turned out to work so well for the story, and it'll come into play in the second book too, which is gonna be so fun.
No, that's exciting. And I like that you're open for moments like that. Like you're not so rigid on your outline to have that freedom to explore and see where the story can take you.
No,
And
totally.
for those that want to read The Legend of I'm going to read this is from Aaron's website, and it's the first sentence of his description for Legend of and it says Sir Dashing Jr. was only knighted because because they couldn't knight his father twice. Like if that doesn't want to like okay, like what happened here? Like that sounds so fun, and I can't wait to read it. I'm excited
Thanks,
to
man.
get that book. Um, so you went the indie route, and you know you're kind of involved with everything. You have to find your editor, your cover designer, and whatnot. How did you find your editor?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've used a handful of different editors through my writing career. I mean, the first editor I hired was through Fiverr, and I wasn't impressed. It felt like they just ran my manuscript through Grammarly and then sent it back to me because there were some very clear errors that an actual editor wouldn't have made. So, I didn't hire them again. Um, but I was lucky to find some friends who were, you know, maybe had editing degrees or English degrees and like had experience actually editing manuscripts. And sometimes they're willing to give me the friend price. No, actually, okay. So my first editor was my friend Adam Anderson, who was actually in that D&D group for The Legend of He got an editing degree from BYU, and so he edited Purged, the sequel to Foreordained, and he did a terrific job with it. And then my friend Spencer edited, Foreordained posthumously. I think republished it with actual editing, and he cut the manuscript down by 17,000 words. It is a much better book now. But yeah, my most recent editor is Leah Taylor, who I met through Instagram, through the Bookstagram community. And she kind of specializes in editing indie author manuscripts and giving a really good rate for indie authors like us. Um, and she's great. Like she leaves terrific notes to kind of like provoke thought and uh, help us just like whittle down our manuscript in more meaningful ways. And yeah, so she's my more recent go-to because she's really affordable and she does great work. So I've used Leah for my last couple of books.
Awesome. And then how did you find your cover artist? I know Foreordained kind of went through a recent cover change.
Yeah. Yeah. So originally, the original forward and cover was my friend Shelby, who I knew from high school, but she was pursuing an art degree at Dixie State, which is now Utah Tech University. So she did the original cover for me based on my art direction, which wasn't great at the time. But I did an overhaul of a lot of my books with my friend Kaylin Russell, who was a coworker of mine years ago. She gave me the friend rate and she designed most of my covers, honestly. So she did a revamp of the Wesleyan Chronicles that was a little bit more like eye-catching and like vibrant. And those are cool. They get kind of like mixed reviews from people because the words purged and foreordained and awakened are kind of broken up on the cover, and there's a silhouette of a sword. So it like looks cool, but it's also like, people either like love it or don't love it. So, um, but yeah, then I went back to Shelby and just with some ideas kind of like refreshed the original trilogy covers, and now like they look terrific. Those are the hard covers and the ebook covers for the book. And hired an illustrator friend of mine named Al to do The Legend of I mean, I just noticed on his Instagram that he was a really good illustrator, great at drawing cartoons, and I thought that his style fit perfectly for the book. So I gave him kind of this like Adventure Time inspired uh, sample and a little mock-up of what I thought the cover could look like, and he just made it shine. I mean, I love that book cover. I think it perfectly speaks to the tone of the book. And then for Where Should I Put This Woodpecker? I did it. I did the cover. I thought it was something like I want to learn to be a better designer. I want to make a book cover. So I designed it myself and I got feedback from some of my friends who are professional designers and oh, you should make this bigger, like you should pick a different font for this. And yeah, so that was just a kind of skill I wanted to develop, and that's the latest book.
That's awesome. That's fantastic that you took that on yourself and, you know, throw it out there for everybody can see and get feedback and whatnot. So that's fantastic. And
Nice.
then one of the unsung challenges that people have is marketing. What have you found successful in marketing your books? You said Legend of Us is doing fantastic. What have you done
Mhm.
different with that one compared to your other ones to make that one successful?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's ironic because in my professional career, I've been in marketing for years and years, but I've been so bad at marketing my books forever, because it's a lot of work. I mean, you work your full-time job and then you come home and you spend a couple hours writing your book, and by that time, like you don't have the energy to market your work. And marketing your book is kind of soul-sucking because we as introverted creators want to just be in our worlds and make something cool, but the thought of putting ourselves out there and not just our work, but like ourselves out there. It's hard. But my friend ZS Diamante, who is a tremendous author in the indie fantasy space right now, he is actually like a full-time indie fantasy author. He's doing it. Um, he stayed with me for StoryCon during February, and I just got to pick his brain about all things book marketing. And, the big thing that he pointed out to me is it's all organic content. Like you have to be on social media making really good content that people engage with, and gets people to look at your work. So that kind of lit a fire under me. And I was like, you know what? While I have the time, I'm going to be making 5 reels a week. I'm going to be targeting fantasy and sci-fi lovers. I'm going to make sure everything points to my book somehow. And it's been freaking working. My audience has been growing a lot in the last 3 or 4 months. And the book sales have been following with it. I did do a lot of public relations outreach before The Legend of came out. I made a spreadsheet of like 400 contacts of critics, influencers, um, bloggers who like fantasy, especially like cozy, like funny fantasy. And I pitched them one by one of, will you please read my book and review it by the time it comes out in February? And the reception was actually incredibly positive. I was expecting to get crickets a lot more, but I think the premise of The Legend of was unique enough that people were like, oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, I'll read it. Like, send me that ebook. And yeah, so when the book came out on release day, it had nearly 50 reviews already on Goodreads, which is really good. Like one of my traditionally published friends was like, "Yeah, if you've got 50 reviews by the time your book comes out, you're off to the races. Like you've crushed it." So it's just been with that momentum and with the organic content that I've been making since its release, it's just been making its rounds around the indie fantasy space where I see comments on Instagram of like, oh, I feel like I'm seeing this book everywhere. And I'm like, good, that's exactly what I want. Um, yeah, and even at my book signing this last Saturday in Provo, there was someone who came up to my booth and said, that's on my TBR. I saw it on Instagram. I'm like, heck yeah, great, we're doing it. So yeah, it's a ton of work, but it pays off.
So has that lifted the other series up as well as far as sales?
A little a little bit. I mean, I get a sale for like Foreordained every once in a while. Yeah, and I noticed someone read My Name is Hammerfist 1 and 2, which is like my most underrated books. Like I think people are so tired of superheroes that they see that and they're like, ah, no thanks. Like I've had enough. But it's such a fun like duology. It's like a fun little series. So I've seen a couple of sales come through that as well. And Love Letters to a House on Fire, my most recent collection of stories, poems, and ransom notes. Like I've noticed some reviews and sales pop up for that, and people are loving it. So yeah, I mean, rising tide raises all ships, but I mean, Legend of Us is leading the pack by far right now. People are just eating it up, but some of my other books have been following along with it to small degrees.
That's awesome. And congratulations. Like that's fantastic.
Thank
Um,
you.
Magic systems can break or make a fantasy world. How do you approach developing rules in your series? And did you ever have to rewrite your rules mid-story?
No, I feel like, I kind of figured out my magic systems at the beginning. Um, and I have mixed feelings about magic systems because I know Brandon Sanderson is kind of like the guy who came along and kind of created the verbology of like hard magic systems that have hard, fast rules. And, it has to make sense. But I'm one of these like fantasy lovers who I'm like, why does fantasy have to make sense? Or why does magic have to make sense? It's magic. Like, I read Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, and I love the magic system in that book because it's like you can't hope to understand it. You can't hope to, you know, fully comprehend what it is or control it because it's so big and vast and wild. And like to me, that's way more exciting. However, I think the video game influence in me is like, oh yeah, like you got your magic meter, you got like certain magic that you can do because of this or that. So that's kind of what I implemented into the Legend of It's very like Dungeons and Dragons influenced magic, but uh in both the Wevelian Chronicles and the Legend of like magic is something you can develop. It's like a muscle you can grow. So even though maybe you've got a knack for magic at the very beginning, as you continue to practice it and push yourself, as you continue to approach your breaking point, and you'll get stronger and stronger magically. And depending on like if you have like an enchanted set of robes or an amulet, like increases your capacity to perform magic, then you can do that too. But the Wevelian Chronicles is cool in that there are like kind of two magic systems in play. You have standard magic that performs the way that I told you just now, and then there's dark magic where you can only perform dark magic based on the lives that you take. So, like some of these dark magic users will have like jars full of roaches or something where they like let a few escape and stomp on them, so they can do a little bit of dark magic. But the thing with that dark magic is when you perform it, it feels euphoric. Like it feels good to perform dark magic. So the more you do it, like the more you want it. And it becomes kind of this like addictive cycle of, oh, you got to take more life so you can perform more dark magic. It's really easy to master and it's powerful and it feels so good to do it. And it ruins the souls of many men. So it's like outlawed for that reason. But yeah, that was a very long-winded way of answering your question. I apologize.
No, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
It reminded me of well, two things reminded me. So going back to the Brandon Sanderson thing, I remember him telling me that, well, I think it was a podcast, so he didn't tell me personally, but
Yeah, I know you guys are tight. Like, just getting coffee. No, you guys are both LDS, so you're not getting coffee. You're getting hot cocoa and just like hanging out with Brandon Sanderson.
but he said that on one of his first panels that he was ever on, he said like Magic had to have rules, and so like this would have been back in like early 2000s or mid 2000s, and like all the rest of the panelists like got mad at him. It's like, no, it's Magic, like you don't have to have rules. And there's been a
Yeah.
shift to where like you see more
Hmm.
books with hard Magic that has rules that Brandon, kind of learned from Dave Wolverton, when he was going to school, um, and now I think there's kind of a tide where it's kind of moving back. It's not quite yet there yet, but like it's kind of going back to that soft magic. Um,
Hmm.
People are looking more for mystery and whatnot, not truly understanding it. And I
Yeah.
like both. I like both hard magic and soft magic.
Yeah.
Um,
See, I feel like I like soft magic a little bit more. It just feels wilder and more magical to me. But I am going to bridge the gap with the second Legend of that's going to come out next year because you've learned about the hard magic that's like a muscle that you grow and you can, some people are inherently really good at it and some people just don't have a magical bone in their body. But in the second book, we're going to learn more about old magic, like the magic that the goddess created the world with, and like a lot of really experienced mages don't touch it because it's like to to practice old magic is to mess with the existence of things, like to mess with their very nature. And like you cannot hope to mess with something's nature unless you understand it completely, which is nearly impossible. So like don't touch it. So anyway, that's going to be fun to kind of like dive into a little bit more.
that sounds amazing. Do you have like a schedule of when Legend of 2 will be out, or do you have a
The
goal?
sec I'm looking at next summer, like the second
Awesome.
Legend of probably like a year from now. I don't think I'll have to do as big of a marketing push, which kind of like, I finished the Legend of last summer. I think like from the first draft to the final draft, it took 7 months. Like I was just blasting through it because I had so much fun. And then I spent a solid 6 to 8 months just marketing it, just pushing it. So now that it's like kind of got its claws in the ground and it's got some stability, like I don't think I'm going to need to market it as hard because there's going to be people lined up to read the arcs and, because they've learned to love the book so much. So yeah, that's going to be easier and I think it's going to shorten the time frame where I can release it, which is a plus for everybody.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you could bring one element, creature, spell, or culture from your books into our world, what would it be and why?
The Wizard Waffles Merchant. He's
What's
awesome.
his waffle version?
Yeah, he's this traveling merchant who sells magical waffles that function like healing potions. So you eat the waffles and they heal you. And they
Just like real
never make
life.
your Oh yeah, exactly. So I mean, you can store them in your pack. They never make a mess. They always stay warm. Yeah. So I would love to see a chain of Wizard waffle merchants all over the place, just like selling their healing waffles. It would put the healthcare industry like absolutely out of business because people would just eat these waffles and be just fine. But for 10 gold to cure your cancer, I mean, I think that's a pretty good deal.
No, yeah, I would take that deal in a heartbeat. That's a pretty
Yeah,
good deal.
absolutely. Yeah, maybe you could even make me taller. I don't know. We'll see.
Same here. What advice would you give aspiring authors that are
Uh,
just barely beginning their journey?
just dive in. Just go for it. I feel like writer's block is a myth. It's writing is a muscle that you continue to grow. Um, Write even during times where you really may not feel like it. And I don't always follow my own advice in that case lately because sometimes I'll be like so focused on marketing that I don't get any writing done for that day or whatever. But professional writers usually hit quotas every day. They give themselves a quota and make sure they hit that, even if they're not like feeling it, because sometimes writing is just work. It's just the grind, and that's okay. It doesn't make it any less meaningful. So push yourself, strive to, finish that book, and don't worry too much about writing when you feel like it. Just get it done. Set some goals for yourself and do it because you can do it.
Awesome. That's great advice. And I don't believe in writer's block either. Like it's
Mhm.
just get it done. People don't have plumber's block or construction block or whatever.
Yeah,
Like you just have to,
yeah,
you go to work even when you're not feeling it, right?
yeah. It's like I'm not gonna fix the sink. That I'm just not feeling like being a plumber today. No, 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 no. Like you're a plumber every day. Like you got to go fix those sinks and toilets. People need you.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you do outside of writing and whatnot to stay balanced and to have fun?
Oh gosh, I feel like writing and book stuff is such a huge part of who I am. I do work part-time as the director of public relations for Operation Literacy, a Utah-based nonprofit that strives to lift individuals and communities up through love of reading and writing. So I do work a lot with them. Um, right now I'm kind of trying to work with the big five publishers in New York City to bring them out for StoryCon in February. StoryCon is our annual convention where we bring a lot of best-selling authors to do book signings, and there's a free vendor floor, and there's a lot of classes you can take on writing and storytelling, depending on what age you're in. We have tracks for adults, teens, tweens. It's awesome. We had our first event this last year, and it was a smashing success. We had thousands of people come, and I just had a blast. Like it was so great. But yeah, this upcoming year, we've got some big names locked in that people are going to be really excited about. And it's going to be great. I'm so stoked to be working with that organization.
Perfect. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about where you're going to be this year if people want to meet you, and also give us your social media so that if they want to follow you?
Yeah, well, social media website, go to aaronnhall.com. So Aaron, another N from my middle initial, and then HALL.com. You can find all my social media from there. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Definitely the most active on TikTok and Instagram. So hit me up there. Let's be friends. Um, the only places where I'll be this year that I have planned right now, I'll be wandering FanX Salt Lake. So if you want to meet up for a high five, DM me on Instagram. I'll come say hi. But this just happened in the last couple of days. I will be at Dragonsteel Nexus. I will have a booth for one day in the Indie Alley this December. So if you want to come get a signed copy of The Legend of or Foreordained, or if you just want a high five, like come say hi. Like I'll be there, and I'll be there the other days as well, working with Operation Literacy.
Awesome. So hit Aaron up if you see him. Follow him, do all that stuff. Aaron, thank you so much for getting on with me. I learned a lot, and I know others will as well. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Carson. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.